that comes later, but you know, it basically comes, anything you have to bunch is, you know, takes more time, it's a more sensitive crop. So, you know, kale, collards, basil. I mean, one year we grew $20,000 worth of basil.
Oh, wow.
And we were like, this is, you know, aren't we great, you know, because we did that. But, you know, that was partially because we'd gone on some numbers, which I'll explain a little bit how we got to in the past, and it looked like basil was doing really good. So we went big with it one year. We had great success selling it, but it was so hard. And, you know, the other thing with basil, it's very finicky, it's very delicate. You have to send your workers out first thing in the morning and do that. And we do it in a hoop house. It gets really hot in there. So, you know, you know, we'd have workers at 6 in the morning, 7 in the morning going out there and doing the basil. Well, that was fine when you get that first flush. Well, boom, it gets this time of year, it doesn't grow so fast. And your worker, and it's dark at 6, you can't work at 6. So they go out there, you know, 7:30, and they you know, they were spending till like 10 o'clock doing basil. Well, almost any crop you grow here, you want to do it first thing. You know, the cooler, this is the time, not when the sun's been out for 2-3 hours. The only exception is tomatoes, because they get the fog on them and it's wet and you can't harvest them wet. Well, the second they're dry, you want to be out there doing this because, you know, they're like melons. They get soft. You know, you don't want to be doing them at 3 in the afternoon, which is what we were doing all the time because we were spending all this time on basil. You know, so this was like a really key decision, and we figured out a lot of this in the off season of like, you know, because we actually track like how many hours are you know, is someone in each crop. They fill out their timesheet at the end of the day, and they put, and, you know, how many hours they do in chilies, how many hours in you know, basil, how many cucumbers or whatever. And so we have this thing called revenue labor, where we look at, you know, at the end of the year we add up how much money we made off of a crop, and we look at how much hours was spent on it. And it's been probably the main thing we use to determine if we're going to continue growing our crop. We basically came with this 30-to-1 ratio of, you know, of that. And if something's under 30, boom, we cut it. And if it's over 30, we keep it. You know, things can get up to 70-to-1, you know, in terms of, you know, money coming in versus hours spent on it. That's where you want to be. We used to be in this kind of trap of thinking like, well, our buyers are, you know, they love the basil, they love the lettuce, and if we don't provide them that, well, then we're not going to have that market built up when we have our tomatoes and peppers and cucumbers, which, you know, make more money. And so, you know, a lot of times, you know, like I say, we were spending all this money, not making any money on that, spending all, and giving our best, hardest time of the day to these things. And what we did over time is we just got tougher, and we just stopped growing those, and we stopped offering that, and it didn't matter. You know, the good, you know, what you'll find for those who go out and establish, you know, a solid business is that if you do something good, people are going to want it. And, you know, some of them will get upset when you don't offer it. Some might make more noise. Some will be like, you know, there were people that, you know, we thought, oh, they're going to make a big deal, and they're like, oh, okay, whatever. And you're like, you know, what? We spent all this time thinking they needed that. And we just learned to, like, let's do what we're good at. You know, we're going to lose our business if we keep trying to make people happy. And, you know, that's one of the biggest lessons learned is, you know, you try to satisfy your buyer by doing things that don't make money for you. Well, eventually that's going to, you know, you're not going to have anything to offer them, and you're going to be, you know, working at Whole Foods instead of selling to them, right? You know, and, so yeah, we found things like radishes just not good. You know, things that have a short window of harvest that don't hold on the vine. I mean, tomatoes are the only thing, and you know, tomatoes drive me nuts. I'll be honest. I mean, tomatoes are great. I love eating them. We grow these dry farmed ones. They're incredible. We've been having a lot of trouble the last 2 years, and they're fickle. And when they come on like a, you know, an army. It's like there's none. Everyone's bugging for them, and everyone wants them. And then boom, one day you have them, and you know, it's like 1 week you have, you know, 10 cases to offer. The next week you have 20 cases to offer, and the next week you have 120 cases to offer. Well, how do you build up your marketing to that? And we actually figured out ways to do that, but it's a headache. And the other thing I've noticed is that as soon as you build up your marketing for something, so, you know, you get your 10, 12 stores on board, you got your farmers markets going, and you hit your climax of you know, production on something, and you've spent all this time holding people off, hey, when are we going to have it? Or you spend all this time bugging people to sell it all, and you've worked it all out, and it lasts maybe a week, and then you're cutting people off already. And you got to decide who you're going to cut off, you know, and it's crazy, you know. Just know that if you're going to have a farm, it's a lot of perishable product, it comes fast and furious, and you're all crazy for doing it. So, you know, if you're willing to do that, go for it. You know, it's a great thing. So yeah, you know, it's taken us a while, and it becomes pretty obvious which crops are good. You know, it's like what do people buy? What's easy to manage the labor on? What's hard? You know, what keeps in your fridge? You know, like mixed sweet peppers have been great for us because we can harvest them, put them in the fridge, they last. you know, we have, you know, a week later, they're in great shape. Sometimes, you know, whereas, you know, tomatoes, you know, sometimes you can't even pick them right. You know, they're too unripe, and then they're too ripe, and that all happens in a day.
Real quick, how much did it cost for you to build your fridge?
The fridge, that's a good question. That's one of the first things we did. We put the value around $12,000. You know, the fridge costs less than that, but we had to pour a concrete pad, and we had to, you know, bring the fridge in and pay for freight. It came from Wisconsin. You know, we couldn't find anything locally.
Did you have to get a permit to be able to have it there?
That's a good question, but we didn't get one. There's no county people are here. It was a little unclear, and you know, one thing I've learned that if something's unclear, you know, it's probably better to just do it. You know, unless you're doing something huge. But you know, we're like, you know, it's a small cooler next to a barn. It's not like an obscene thing we're doing. There's no water running near there, but so we didn't pay any permit fees. But then, you know, just you have to get, you know, you got to get the cooler professional come out and hook it up, and there's a couple of hiccups along the way, and you know, you got to build some stuff. You know, we had to build a cover for it because, you know, the sun in the summer, you know, really affects the cooler. So all in all, we put the price tag around 12 grand. What's that?
What's the size?
It's like 10 by 12. And I'll tell you though, you know, that might sound intimidating, but the cooler is kind of what made the farm happen. I mean, if we hadn't done the cooler, you know, just this, you know, part of our inn and part of how we got big was, one of the size we got was, there used to be a flying frog farm that in Sebastopol, and they sold a lot of greens, and there was a friend of ours, Mike Steinberg, who did that, and he was getting a little older and wanted to get out, and he had these good accounts with the local Whole Foods and with Oliver's and such, and he's like, I'm getting out, you guys should take over what I'm doing. And so we actually were able to go to the Santa Rosa Whole Foods and meet with the buyers there and the produce people, and be like, hey, he wants to hand this over, and they were like, oh yeah, we're definitely interested, and you know, and it was a lot of lettuce, they go through a lot of lettuce. So we put in the cooler. I mean, if you try to do a lettuce without a cooler, you're asking for trouble. And this was, you know, it's 10 years ago. You know, there's a lot of rules coming on board about, like, I mean, it's not gonna be long until you show up to a store and they're gonna automatically pull out the temperature, and if it's, you know, if they reach in the box and it's over, you know, say 42 or whatever it is, they're gonna say, sorry, we can't take it. But back then, you know, those rules are coming down the line because of food safety stuff. But yeah, we could, you know, Kevin did it for several years without a cooler, and you know, but he was mostly farm market where you can do that. You know, and in this part of the county, it's cooler, you know, especially over in Sebastopol, you know, that part of Santa Rosa. But you need a cooler, and so, you know, that was our in, is to do a lot of lettuce, and, you know, we're doing, you know, 150, 24 count cases a week on a big week, you know, it's a lot of lettuce. And so, yeah, the cooler. The cooler is good. And another question, yeah, people are asking, you know, what did we need to do? It wasn't that many things we needed to really have to get going. You have to have a cooler. You got to have a vehicle. I mean, you're going to deliver farmers markets, you know, unless you have a CSA only and they're coming to your place, which, you know, is great, but, you know, there's only one farm I know that really does that. And even they do deliveries. That's the Guna Farm. You got to have a truck. You got to have tractors. I mean, we have 3 tractors. We don't need 3. We used to have more land. We had a place up in Occidental. We had a place over in Cape Bay Valley for a year. But we use all 3 tractors, you know, for sure. And tractors do different things. You know, one of the things we have is now is a cultivating tractor, which by cultivating means weeding, and it's really cool. We got this old diesel rigged into a electric, and it's quiet, and you got these parts, and you go down, and we figured out one year that we spent, that year we're doing a lot of greens, we figured we spent $17,000 on weeding. Oh. Yeah, we're like, oh my goodness, what are we doing? So we spent $8 grand, and we got the cultivating tractor. And it's been great, you know, so you got to spend a lot of money, but sometimes spending the money saves you money, and that's what you need to think of in these situations.